Hello, everybody. How is everyone doing? Welcome back to another Thoth video. Okay, now today we're going to do something kind of interesting. Okay, it's all about the pairings, people. The two cards that seem to correlate with one another. Okay, and as I stated in a lot of videos before this, I usually get my information from the Book of Thoth. Now, I have researched all these pairings, like I said, with the Book of Thoth. But then, when I would like to dive, I will look up the cards individually in other books as well. So check out my book recommendations for this deck. I'll put a link to it in the description for you if you want to check those out. Okay. And I don't think that this is going to be a fairly long video because we only have a couple of pairings, and I've got some really neat stuff coming up in my plans for the Thoth deck. Stuff I want to touch base on, stuff that fascinates me. As this is our very first, I think this is our very first Thoth video in March. Wow, that's exciting. Okay. Now, Crowley doesn't go into too much detail about these pairings, okay? He just seems to say, okay, like when we are reading about the High Priestess card, for example, that's this one right here. When we're reading about it, he'll say, well, look to the moon for more description about this thing, okay? I've said in a lot of my videos, he kind of goes back and forth, right? So I have to chase his rabbits with him if I want to get any kind of information. But upon reading about a certain card and it clicks about why he positioned the things in this card and how it kind of correlates with another, I thought that was so fascinating that even if there were only a couple of pairings, I wanted to make a video about it because I thought, well, if I find it fascinating, someone out there would too, especially those of you that might be beginning or even if you're already versed in the Thoth, but you really don't like the Book of Thoth. A lot of people don't like that essay because of he just tends to be unorganized, right? So a lot of people don't like that. They just want, let's get to the nitty gritty, okay? So if you haven't read the Book of Thoth, or if that's not something that interests you, then maybe me going along doing some of these things when I do my own research in video form will expand all of us, right? So that's the purpose of this. Okay. Now that I've gotten through with my 2-minute ramble, let's get started, okay? As you can see, the first pairing is the High Priestess and the Moon. Now, the High Priestess, okay, now if you think way back on my Tree of Life video, the High Priestess is like, she's not manifested yet, okay? So let me just say that real fast. But she's the very first card that connects the supernal triad with the Godhead, okay? So I've said before that I kind of consider her the conduit between people and the spirit up here. And I don't know if you can see all of this, okay? But these little spirals right here on her head that's like the Onsof R, or Onsof Or, however you pronounce it. That is the very top of the Tree of Life, those 3 stages of light. And so I believe she's the conduit, right? And she's the first card that's manifested in this card form, okay? So she's not manifested in a total sense, but it's the first card that tells us of the connection and that we need we need to embody something to get to the Godhead, okay? We can't just get there through, I think there's a lot of rituals and a lot of magic that goes along, in Crowley's opinion, okay? That goes along with all of that on how to be the conduit between you and spirit. So apparently she's the first card that symbolizes, okay? Now, if that's the case, now why would they correlate with the moon, right? Well, if she is the first card that is like shows us the connection between the supernal triad, so Crowley calls it. It's like the Holy Trinity, right? She would be the first card. The Great Mother would be the first, okay, so to speak. And then the moon would be the most exalted conception, which to me that meant, like, I always thought of this as like like a subconscious card. Okay, there's stuff down here in the abyss and all these waves. Anubis is standing at the gateway, right? And your job is to go through here, right? Wade through these black pillars of illusionment to get to the light yods, right? Well, if that's the case, then this right here is like her, is like the most exalted form of her, right here. Now it says it's Anubis, right? But essentially, okay, you have to go through him to get here. And if that's the case, then that's basically like Anubis is manifesting the high priestess to be the conduit then. Okay? He's the one telling you whether you can go or not. And I believe that there's an embodiment of her there in these two pillars, right? And I guess I thought I would be able to explain that better, but I guess not. Let's move on before I put my foot in my mouth. Okay. The next two is my absolute favorite. Okay. It's the Lovers and the Art card. And for people who aren't versed in the Thoth, this would be the Temperance card in I'll say a more conventional deck. Now, the Lovers and the Art in Crowley's Book of Thoth, they're considered twins. Okay? Now these two cards together, they compose the comprehensive alchemical maxim, which is coagulation. Okay, so if we look at this alchemically, then this is the sacred marriage. Okay, but then after the marriage, there's a melting of the two, and they kind of go like this, and that's what this is. A lot of stuff happens in between the marriage and that, alchemically, but these are the two base forms of the alchemical marriage. One is them coming together, and this one is then totally blended as one. So I thought that was pretty interesting, because Crowley states in the Book of Thoth, it was so interesting because he says that if you study this one, you have to study this one as well, because it's pretty much the same thing. And I love that Crowley says that this is like the Cain and Abel aspect. So this is Adam and Eve, right? But then the serpent down here, okay? I believe that the serpent in the creation story is about the darkness, about the shadow aspect of ourselves, the dark aspects of ourselves that we tend to shun. And we do that from a very early age. But it's about Eve, okay, when she marries Adam, okay, and they have Cain and Abel. Cain was actually, again, according to Crowley, Cain, okay, and I'm just doing the dark baby for lack of, he doesn't actually say. So if this is Cain, then that would be the baby of Eve and the serpent, Eve and the dark, because if you know the story, he's the first murderer. He murders Abel. And if this is Abel, then that's the pure baby, and that's the actual baby of them two, right? And I'll have to pull this up. Y'all know me. I like to give y'all close-ups, okay? Now, this figure, this hooded figure, and as you can see, look at his mouth. He's got this great Gandalf beard, right? It's actually a figure of the hermit. And I thought that was so fascinating. You can kind of see the tie-in between the eagle and the lions down here as well. But just for the general aspect, it's like, okay, he says that this is Gemini, which is still twins, right? So, are Cain and Abel twins? And if that's the case, then it kind of changes the Adam and Eve story, because the story also says that some stories, like I said, in Crowley's case, he thinks that Cain is the Eve and the snake's child, and then Adam and her maid, Abel. But if we look at this in the Gemini aspect, like Crowley wants us to, signifying that these twins are one being, one dark, one light, and how we have both. And how he thinks that the Gemini itself isn't like actual twins. It's the fact that we are all twins in a sense. We all have the dark. We all have the light. We all have the sense in us. We all have those aspects in us that could make us the first murderer, okay? And it's about working through all of that. It's about working through. See, one of them has a club and one of them has the roses. And it's about working through and trying to merge the two to be the best possible person you could be. And the hermit up here, if this figure is the hermit, then he's looking down upon this holy marriage and this holy twin, okay, dynamic down here, this dualistic twin down here of Cain and Abel. Then it's also about you have to go within to get to this. So I thought that was fascinating if we look at it that way, okay, like Crowley, like I said, like Crowley says. But then we look at this art card, okay. Again, for those of you not versed in the Thoth deck, this would be the Temperance card. And they are completely merged, okay. Now, as this is the opposite of Gemini, which would be Sagittarius, there's a little arrow that signifies that right there, which I thought was pretty cool, of Lady Frida Harris. But they're completely merged together. And if this is Sagittarius with, with the bow right here, these two things right here, I thought that they were moons when I first started studying the deck, but it's actually Sagittarius's bow. And I was just like, gosh, that's so ingenious. But, okay, if this is the melding of the two, then this, in the Lover's card, is the work that you need to put in, the shadow work and the light work. And then you are in the process of doing this, but you're not. And this is where you're this. Where you have done the work, you have done the work for self, you have gone within, okay? And your dark and light are playing together and they've mixed and you don't even know which one's which. I love how Rachel Pollack, she described this card as, what did she say? That prudence, okay, another word for temperance, is like unhumanly calm, right? So once you've melded the two, this shadow and light aspect of yourself, then it's almost like going against your nature then, because everything's done mixed up, right? Your shadow, you don't know what's shadow, what's light. You don't know what's good, what's bad. And it's about figuring yourself out. So this is, you've done the work in this, but now you have to do the work to remember. You have to just like constantly keep telling yourself, I need to stick with my morals. I need to figure them out. Okay. I need to figure out what my pet peeves are, figure out what makes me tick, and figure out what makes me happy. And it's about the work. You're a whole self now. You weren't over here. You're a whole self now. And now it being the complete form of this, okay, you're completely formed. Now you have to go back within and figure out what makes you an individual then. Because this is inhuman almost. This inhuman calm, right? We're not meant to go against nature. So I thought that was fascinating. Okay. Like I said, I don't really envision this being a long video. Okay. Now, the next two pairings are the wheel. These are sliding everywhere. The wheel and the tower card, okay? Which I wouldn't have thought that they would have paired up, right? But they are interpreted as a unity of supreme attainment and delight. So the lightning in each card, okay? Now in Crowley's rendition of the tower card, the lightning is back here. I don't know if you can see. It's way in the back, like it's in the background. Like that lightning is just laying there in the background. But in here, the lightning is coming down and hitting the wheel in all areas, okay? Now, what that means is the lightning which destroys also begets. In both cards. The wheel symbolizes that the devotees, okay, these are these figures around the wheel. It's like at that moment that the wheel or that these devotees they're trying for perfection, right? As soon as they get perfection, the wheel crushes them. Because it's doing this, right? the wheel is doing this. So as soon as they gain perfection, they're already at the bottom and they're getting pounded. Okay? By the rotation, by the cycle of it. Okay? And that's what happens here, only in a different sense. Okay? Now, the tower is understood in a double sense, each contradicting the other. Okay? That's kind of how I think of it. Because I think they're both these geometric people, okay? They've lost their human figure. I've said this in a previous video. They've lost their human figure because they have been so organized in this structure of their life that they've lost themselves. So it's about coming back and figuring out what's perfection again, thus turning the wheel, which is what this card's all about. Gaining a perspective that you think is perfection, okay? See, once you think you found perfection, you're no longer perfect anymore. So that's the message with this, according to Crowley, is that you strive for perfection going this way, and then as soon as you obtain it, you're getting crushed by it. It's no longer perfect, right? It's like as soon as you obtain something, the satisfaction goes with it. You're like, oh, damn. So, that's all I wanted to say for that. Let's keep going, okay? We only have 2 more pairs. So like I said, this is only going to be a short video today. But it was so fascinating. I wanted to share it with everybody. Okay. Now, this is the star. I love her. She's like my favorite. Besides the Queen of Pentacles, she's my favorite in the Thoth deck. Now, this is the star, and this is the Aeon card, or the Aeon, okay? Now, the star is a manifestation, okay? Now, this is Neith, Lady of the Stars, the star goddess, okay? And so she's like the personification in human form. She's the manifestation, right? She's like this will-o-wisp that comes out, right? That's twinkling out there, and you have no idea why she's twinkling or how she's manifesting, but she is, right? That's what this is. And then the Aeon, or the Aeon, that's the space of all heaven that Neith is embodying. So if this is the human figure of Neith, this symbolized right here, okay? This is her. This is her. So if this is the human figure, then this is her as a total being, okay? Fully manifested, right? She's kind of like, this is kind of like Neith in a philosophical sense. It's like an idea, this continuous thing, like an aeon is just doing this, right? Another cycle. And if that's the case, then she's kind of like omniform. She's an omniform here, where here she's fully manifested, she's been personified, but then this is like the expanded version of her, which I thought was so fascinating. Now, the last pairing I want to go over is actually not, I guess it was not considered a pairing like the other ones. I have to watch out for this flame, folks. Flame's dangerous, right? I did want to have a candle because this Himalayan salt lamp is like, I just love it. Anyway, now, like I said, this is not going to be a conventional pairing because it's not paired up like the other pairs. Now, the universe card, okay, let's straighten that out, shows this like beautiful dancing figure, right? And she's manipulating the radiant spiral force, the active and passivity of the universe itself, right in the center of this. Now, if you really look at this thing right here, it's kind of like a triskele. Okay, I think that's how you say that. It's like a Celtic knot, and it has this. It's doing this, like going out, in, out, in, and it's just like, it's like if you picture it, this is like a figure 8 and a figure 8, so that's like 3. And it's constantly doing the figure 8 symbol, but in a triquetra, like a triquetra like symbol. But anyway, her partner is from the Sun card, a figure called, okay, Heru Ra Ha. Okay, that's the figure in the Sun card right here, or several. And he is the Lord of the new Eon. So he is the manifestation of like the spiritual. Okay, so that's, he's the manifestation of the sun's power in spiritual, moral, and physical sense. So this is the manifestation of the sun, the manifestation of the Lord of the new aeon in spiritual, moral, and physical sense, right? But then the universe card represents the complete emancipation of the human race. So if this is the Lord of the new aeon, then he's just manifesting himself in a spiritual way, right? In a moral way, in a physical way. But then he's striving for this. But this is the first time that he's manifesting the spiritual, moral, and physical sense of this. It's the very first time that he's doing the work for this. And so it's just so beautiful. Like emancipation means freedom, right? So it's like we're all getting emancipated here, but then this is where the work for the emancipation first begins. And I thought that was so beautiful. Like, what a way to word that, okay? There's an appendix section in the Book of Thoth for the universe card, and it has a great saying in there that I want to read. It says, "Will bends like a reed in the tempest that sweeps the borders of her kingdom, and imagination cannot figure so much as one petal of the lilies, whereon she standish in the lake of crystal, in the sea of glass." Doesn't this look like the color of sea glass right here? Oh, and how, if you think about that saying about the reeds in the tempest, that's a whole other saying, okay? The reeds right there by the sea in like a sand dune, they're not getting pulled out of the sand. Their roots are so stable that all they do is bend like this. They just in the wind. They're not getting plucked out. Nothing can pluck them out hardly. It's basically he's saying the strength of this, the emancipation of this, the completion of this is so strong that we're going to be like the reed in the wind, in the tempest, right? Our roots are stuck, and it's up to us to figure out if that's a good or a bad thing. So, I'm so glad that you joined me again. I've got like I said before, I've got some really neat stuff coming in studying the Thoth, okay? So come back in a couple of weeks on my Thoth Thursday, all right? Much love.